Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Sorry, I can't hear you. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. It's after lunch and certainly before some much-needed caffeine. So as the introductions mentioned, my name is Lamia Naji, and I work with the World Bank Digital Development Team here in Addis. As you can see, the title of this presentation is quite timely, given the really dynamic exchanges that just took place. And so essentially, I will be doing a crash course on what is required or the ideal policy enabling environment. So thank you so much to the speakers for setting me up for this presentation. Super. But before I get started, and again, based on the prior discussion that was just had, it's very clear that there are so many policy considerations when it comes to enabling digital development and enabling digital transformation. So my first caveat to you today is that this discussion is non-exhaustive. The presentation that I will share with you today really just scratches the surface, and it really builds on a growing body of literature that is being prepared by the World Bank, but also by development partners. So I'd like to flag two resources before I get started. The first is a joint publication with the International Telecommunications Union, the ITU. It's called the Digital Regulation Handbook. The second is a World Bank flagship initiative, and it is the Regulatory Watch Initiative, RWI. So if you're very keen to pick up on some of the items that our colleagues just mentioned on the prior panel and would like to delve deeper in what I shared today, feel free to consult these resources. And of course, there are other resources by the GSMA and A4AI, etc. Now, my second caveat, and I promise there's only two caveats. My second caveat is that we all know that digital transformation transcends well beyond just the digital sector. I can hear some murmurs that's a bit distracting, so if you don't mind, you're so close to the podium. So digital transformation, of course, involves the ICT sector, but transcends to other sectors like health, education, transportation, finance, etc. And we would be here for weeks, if not months and years, if we were going to go through every policy in every sector. So to prioritize the discussion and the presentation, I'm going to focus on three specific areas that the World Bank invests in, and that's the connectivity market, the data market, and the online market. So what exactly do I mean when I'm referring to the connectivity market? Again, we've heard this already today, but it's essentially the first, middle, and last mile digital infrastructure that acts as the prerequisite for any digital product or application. One of my favorite images or portrayals of this is from ITU, and so as you can see, the first mile is essentially the national backbone that acts as the international connectivity link to a country, and that could be terrestrial fiber, it could be satellite, it could be submarine cables, etc. Then we move to the middle mile, which also can be fiber, but can also be satellite. I should mention that the World Bank hasn't yet invested in satellite for the middle and last mile infrastructure, but it's certainly an area that we are increasingly considering. And then, of course, we have the last mile, which relies on wireless or wired. Now, why is this also important for the bank and for the digital transformation ecosystem? Because it is at the core of enabling the availability of internet, the affordability of internet, and of course, the reliability of internet. And in terms of cost, what the World Bank seeks to achieve is a global target for emerging markets where the cost for any broadband entry package is approximately 2% of gross national income. So now we have the I'm using two screens here. We have the what and the why in terms of the goal. So I can dive a bit deeper in terms of the actual policy areas. And the first is, of course, competition. We've heard this word a few times during the last panel. And specifically what we look for, and again, keep in mind this is non-exhaustive, a regulatory authority. The bank also promotes regulation regarding the significant market power, where it encourages that there isn't one dominant player and that there's an ecosystem for fair markets and competition. In the mobile market, we look for and promote full competition in 3G, 4G, yes, 5G, and someone also mentioned 6G in the future. We also look for full competition in international gateways, and that's both in the mobile and fixed markets, and technology neutrality. Again, working with two screens here. Okay, the next area is infrastructure licensing, and this can range from openness for passive infrastructure, openness for wholesale operations, infrastructure sharing, again, what was mentioned in the prior panel. This could be with the energy sector, with the transport sector, and also in terms of transparency of right-of-way. Another important policy area for connectivity is spectrum management, so existence of procedures for transparent and open auctions for radio spectrum, transparency of fees in general, and also transparent assignment methods for mobile wavebands. Then we promote the regulation of international access to make sure that there is an absence of exclusivity rights, an absence of price floors when it comes to voice traffic, and essentially an enabling environment that includes regulation for international access in general. Universal service is also very key, and so essentially ensuring that a market has the procedures for universal service, has the financing mechanisms to make universal service a reality, which means players in the market are actually participating in the USF, and then having actual financed projects towards the universal service. Because what we find in some markets is you can have all the legislation, but of course enforcement is lacking. So these are just an aspect of the policy areas that are very important for connectivity, but again, there are so many other aspects that are not outlined here. Now, for the data market, what does that mean? Well, that's essentially the frameworks that are needed to put in place privacy and trust, particularly in the context of the digital and data age. And this is also especially the case given the rise and the increase in demand of data due to data centers, cloud computing, and AI. So the goal is to build a secure and robust systems for data flows, storage, processing, and interoperability, and it's to essentially enable data and analytics for digital services and businesses. And so here, the main areas of policy are around data protection, making sure that there is a legal basis for data protection and for data management. Ideally, also ensuring that there's a data protection authority. Similarly, for cybersecurity and cybercrime, making sure that there's data security and cybersecurity standards, and institutions like a computer emergency and response team, also known as a CERT. Finally, for licensing, what we've also kind of heard about earlier today, and this is with respect to IXPs, data centers, and content providers, making sure that there are, or this is navigating the local and cross-border authorizations and licensing. And again, these vary from country to country. And for the World Bank, the policy areas of reform are all concerned about unification and harmonization. So finally, we get to the third area, and this is the online market. And so essentially, Once we have the connectivity and once we have the secure data and privacy frameworks in place, the concept is that platforms and applications can then be adopted safely and also at scale. And this essentially speaks to applications within the digital sector, but also applications well beyond the sector. And essentially here it becomes an enabler, as was discussed previously. And so the goal becomes promoting innovative digital products, services, and businesses, and ultimately digital transactions that make a digital economy a reality. And so what is often required here are policies and strategies for electronic transactions and e-signatures, of course, e-commerce policies and strategies, digital ID. We also emphasize digital skills, which again touches other sectors beyond the digital sector itself. And for digital payments, we look at AML-CFT, national payment systems, regulatory sandboxes. And for trade, customs, and logistics, it can range from lowering trade barriers on duties and custom duties for telecommunication services and devices, promoting cross-border data flows, and essentially unlocking what's required for ICT solutions in digital trade. So this can be national single windows, automated customs management system, trade information portals, cargo tracking system, etc. That is a mouthful. So, putting these three markets together, we have the connectivity layer, which, as I mentioned, is essentially the foundational layer, the data market layer, and the online market. And the World Bank, through its projects, promotes all three of these markets at the national level, but then also at the regional level. And at the regional level, it really becomes about, again, as mentioned previously, harmonization and unification. And so, very quickly, connectivity market, you see the infrastructure. Data market, you see the data protection, privacy, cybersecurity, content regulation. Online market, you see a host of digital products and services. And on the regional side, it's essentially at each level removing the cross-border barriers to promote a single digital market. Now, earlier, again, the previous panel had alluded to the African Union and the African Telecommunications Union, the ATU. With our projects, the World Bank works with the AU, but also sub-regional, regional economic communities. Currently, on the East Africa side, we're working very closely with the Eastern African Community, the EAC, and their Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, to essentially promote the harmonization of existing policies and also support member countries develop legislation. And so currently, the World Bank has 342 million projects that have been approved under what is called the Eastern African Regional Digital Integration Project. You can see that as part of this project, we have member countries Somalia and South Sudan. As mentioned, we also work very closely with EAC and IGAD. A second phase of this project has recently involved Ethiopia and Djibouti. And as a standalone project, but very much still integrated, we have the Kenya Digital Economy Acceleration Project. Now, what's not mentioned on this screen is two additional investments for Ethiopia. We have a standalone 200 million digital Ethiopia integration project that's about 2.5 years of implementation. And we also have the digital ID project, which is 350 million and was approved in December, and that's to enable FIDA services and integration for e-commerce and electronic transactions, etc. So through these three areas, the World Bank is promoting a single digital market, not just through investments in physical infrastructure and soft infrastructure, but also through policy reform. We work with regulators and, as I mentioned, regional economic communities. So that is the extent of the presentation. I hope I didn't bore you with all the policy elements. I encourage you to check out the various resources that the bank and development partners have engaged on policy regulation for digital transformation. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lamia. A big round of applause for a very comprehensive framework and very good insights on digital integration. Fantastic topic.